Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In this video, me, Fina, and my friend Irma and Cecil will explain about communicative language teaching. Communicative language teaching can be understood as a set of principles about the goals of language teaching, how learners learn a language, the kind of classroom activities that best facilitate learning, and the roles of the teachers and learners in the classroom. The goals of language teaching. Communicative language teaching sets as its goals the teaching of communicative competence. It includes the following aspects of language knowledge. First, knowledge how to use language for a range of different purposes and functions. Second, knowing how to vary our use of language according to the setting, the participants. Example, knowing when to use formal and informal speech. Third, knowing how to produce and understand different types of text, like narrative, report, and interview conversation. Fourth, knowing how to maintain communication despite having limitation in one's language knowledge. The example is through using different kind of communication strategies.
Hi everyone! I'm going to continue my friend's presentation. I'm going to talk about how learners learn a language, and then the roles of the teachers and the students. First, how learners learn a language. There are some ways to learn in communicative language teaching. First is interaction between the learners and the users of the language, or someone kind of like native speakers of the foreign language. And then the second one is collaborative creation of meaning. The next is creating meaningful and purposeful interactions with language, because the goal of this method is to communicate, so it can make us to be able to communicate in the right way. And then next is negotiation of meaning as the learner, and his or her interlocutor arrive at understanding. And then next is learning through attending to the feedback learners get when they use the language. And then the sixth, paying attention to the language, one ears or the input. In this way, we are trying to incorporate new forms into one's developing communicative competence. And then the last one, but not least, is trying out and experimenting with different ways of saying things. So we have to practice to use the words of that language. Next is the roles of the teachers and the learners in the classroom. The roles of the learners or the students in this in this learning method is to participate in the classroom activities that were based on a cooperative rather than individualistic approach to learning. The students had to become comfortable with listening to their peers in group work or pair work tasks. Rather than relying on a teacher for a model, they were expected to take on a greater degree of responsibility for their own learning. While the teacher's role in this learning is to assume the role of facilitator and monitor, rather than being a model for correct speech and writing, and one with the primary responsibility of making students produce plenty of error-free sentences. The teachers had to develop a different view of learners' errors and her or his role in facilitating language teaching. So maybe that's all from me. And then next is my friend's presentation.
Okay, I'm Mayasari Silfia Maharsuci. Here I will continue the next to discuss about the material, that is classroom activities in CLT and the project-based approach. The first is classroom activities in CLT. Classroom activities in CLT has several activities. The first is accuracy versus fluency activities. Fluency is natural language use occurring when a speaker engages in meaningful interaction and maintains comprehensible and ongoing communication despite limitation in his or her communicative competence. While accuracy practice focuses on creating a correct example of language use. Next, mechanical, meaningful, and communicative practice. Mechanical practice refers to a controlled practice activity which students can successfully carry out without necessarily understanding the language they are using. Next, meaningful practice refers to an activity where language control is still provided but where students are encouraged to make meaningful choices when carrying out practice. And the last is communicative practice refers to activities where practice in using language within a real communicative context is the focus, where real information is exchanged, and where the language used is not totally predictable. Okay, third is information gap activities. This refers to the fact that in real communication, people normally communicate in order to get information they do not process. This is known as an information gap. Okay, and the last one is jigsaw activities. This is also based on the information gap principle. Typically, the class is divided into groups and each group has a part of the information needed to complete an activity. The class must fit the pieces together to complete the whole. In so doing, they must use their language resource to communicate meaningfully and so take part in meaningful communication practice. Okay, and the next material is project-based CLT approach. Number one is text-based instruction. Text-based instruction, also known as genre-based approach, is communicative competence as involving the mastery of different types of text. Text here is used in special sense to refer structured sequence of language that are used in specific contexts in specific ways. Next is competency-based instruction. Competency-based instruction is an approach to the planning and delivery of course that has been widespread use since the 1970 years. The application of its principles to language teaching is called competency-based language teaching or CBLT, an approach that has been widely used as the basis for the design of work-related and survival-oriented language teaching programs for adults. It seeks to teach students the basic skills they need in order to prepare them for situations they commonly encounter in everyday life.